In front of every digital camera sensor is a piece of glass that blocks ultraviolet and infrared light. But what would happen, say, if you removed that piece of glass and let infrared and ultraviolet light through? Well, you'd get something that looks sort of like that. But why would you do that? That doesn't look very good, admittedly. Well, maybe you replace it with a different little piece of glass. One that, in this case, for example, lets the visible light part of the spectrum pass, but also a piece of the infrared part of the spectrum. You can do this modification yourself, although I wouldn't. I specifically wouldn't. You certainly can. Not going to be free, though. Still going to have to purchase a couple of things, so why not just let the experts do it? So, there's the option of modifying it yourself, there's the option of having it modified, and there's the option of just purchasing a camera that's already been modified. But then there's the question of why. Why do it? Well, if you really love infrared photography, obviously, that would be a reason to do it. And if that describes you, you probably know far more than I do on the subject. But I'm going to make a case for there being a second group of people who could benefit from this, and that's people who get bored easily. That'd be the negative way of spinning it. And another way of spinning it, the positive way or a positive way, would be you just like options. You like capturing the world in a variety of different ways. The place in which I live is a very uninspiring place to me. It does very little toward the goal of making me want to leave the house with a camera and walk around taking photos. So I need these little things to grab onto. I need my infrared, I need my intentional camera movement, I need my tilt shift lens and my medium format film camera. And speaking of options, as for the conversion itself, you have options. But if you are the type to get bored easily, as I said, you probably want to opt for the full spectrum conversion. The alternative being to pre-lock it to a specific wavelength in the infrared part of the spectrum. But then that's all you will ever get with it. With a full spectrum camera, you now have the option of using different infrared filters to achieve whatever look that filter is going to give you. This one happens to be my favorite because the results you see are basically what you're getting in camera, with a little tweaking of contrast, saturation, whatever. I'm not big on spending a lot of time editing photos. I really like being out shooting, and I really dislike editing. And it's not a philosophical thing where I think it's not real photography if you spend a lot of time editing. It's definitely real photography. I just don't like doing it. That's maybe a little dishonest. I do have a bias or a philosophical preference to unedited, straight out of the camera images, or close to it. Yeah, I do. That's an admission I should make. Not exactly sure what to do with that information, but there it is. Maybe it's time to challenge that bias. Maybe I need to reevaluate. I'll think about that. Now, occasionally I regret my decision to modify this camera. Although there are times when I'm really glad I have it, and I think it's cool, more often I find myself wishing that I could somehow undo the conversion, because having another visible light camera in my arsenal would be of more use. Now, don't read too much into that, because regretting things, that's just sort of what I do. With an additional filter, you can return it to functioning like a normal visible light camera, however at a cost. A monetary cost, yes, but also a cost of convenience. And more importantly, loss of quality. Not in every case a loss of quality, but in one specific case, a distinct loss of quality, and that would be facing into a light source. This filter is very prone to flare, and it's a very ugly kind of flare. Very smudgy, kind of losing contrasts, but not uniformly across the image. It's just a very bad, ugly flare. I do occasionally flirt with the idea of selling my full spectrum camera and then putting the money back into a visible light camera. But then I break it out of mothballs here and there, use it, and have a great time with it. And is that not the point of having a camera? Or at least, what more could you expect from a camera than that? So then I don't sell it, and I end up having a good time with it. There's these sporadic pockets of joy it brings me, kind of intermixed with this larger sense of how it just ultimately reminds me of what I've lost. Kind of sounds like some of my human relationships. Didn't realize I'd be going to therapy today. I'll make yet another admission here. I love a good alley. Place for portraits, a place for non-portraits. I just love me some alley. I'd love some sunlight as well, but guess that's too much to ask. I'm still very much in the process of trying to train myself to shoot non-portrait photos that are compelling. In doing so, I've noticed that my portraits have gotten worse. Maybe that's inevitable because I'm thinking it a different way. Really was hoping that how it would work instead would be that I could apply this new experience back into the portrait process, but so far I found that that's not how it goes at all. It just, as I'm improving in one area, I'm getting worse in the other. I imagine in time it will level off. I just made an assertion that I am improving. That's kind of a bold statement to make. Am I improving? Or have I just adjusted my expectations to be more in line with my abilities and my circumstances? I'm not sure. I'd like to think I'm improving, maybe. But I wouldn't like to think that I'm improving if I'm not improving. I'd rather have reality than a comforting lie.
Okay, I'm seeing one adult. Can I see a New Mexico ID just real quick?
Mm-hmm. Healthy, though, I'd say that I haven't really thought of it in those terms until now. If photographing plants isn't your thing, as is the case with me typically, I suspect that it will become your thing in very short order when you're out shooting with this filter, because that's where the action is. That's where you're getting things that are ordinarily one color reading as a different color. Red being that color, or orange or pink, depending on how you white balance and so forth, so on. And speaking of white balance, I don't fret about it that much. Literally, here's how I handle white balance. I put the filter on, I look through the EVF or the screen, and I choose one of the auto white balance modes. Not literally auto white balance, but what I mean is one of the preset modes. If you just scroll through them, one of them will basically look right, and then you just go with that. It's such a non-factor that I sort of don't even remember. For other infrared filters, it's more of a factor, more time-consuming, more important to get it close, at least in the sense of having an idea of what you're getting. And for other infrared filters I've tried, I end up setting the Kelvin value manually, but no need with this one. Just pick one of the preset modes, it'll be fine. It'll get you basically there. And then for post-processing, I don't really do much. I found some settings that worked in the past. I saved them as a preset. I have 3 versions of that preset, and I find that they basically apply to every scenario. Sounds pretty lazy when I just lay it out there like that, but that is the reality. With one exception, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I like occasionally throwing the lens into manual focus and intentionally throwing it out of focus, and that way you can really concentrate on shape, let other distractions fall away. For me, it's still discovery, constant state of discovery. Had no idea what the yellow in this flower would do. Turns out it did nothing, but I had to discover that. So I am colorblind, so I would never presume to speak with authority on matters of color, but I will tell you that I diverged from the 3 presets I spoke of starting here. I started white balancing off things in the frame, and in some cases the red was less pronounced, at least that's the way I saw it. In some cases the red was just as pronounced, in some cases it shifted way to the blue end of the spectrum. And although I have no love for tinkering photos to death, anything white balance related I figure is fair game, especially in the context of shooting infrared photography, wherein capturing the typical colors you see in the wild every day would be antithetical to the entire enterprise. Why do it if that's your concern? I've been shooting more and more with this macro lens I have, at least desiring to shoot more and more with it. It's not a fancy high-end macro lens. I've owned it 3 times though in my career, which is silly. but for different reasons. Once to shoot jewelry for a catalog, once because I was doing a lot of newborn photography, and then I don't even know why I own it now. I guess I just thought it'd be fun with one of my film cameras that I have. But I've actually been using it a lot, and despite the fact that it's a fairly inexpensive lens that you can pick up used, or that I did pick up used, it's quite sharp. I really wouldn't expect the high-end version of this lens to perform that much better. Maybe I'd be surprised, but I continue to be very impressed with this inexpensive lens. And I'm getting more and more into the spirit of shooting macro, and that's fun. Capturing parts of the world at a different scale than we normally interact with it, or with them, and at a different wavelength of light than we can see. Granted, in the image it's coming into your eye at a wavelength you can see, but that's beside the point. Those two things make a great combo. It's a lot of fun. You know, I go around thinking that I like photographing people, and yet I always end up disappointed with the job I've done, even if at first I like what I got. Give it enough time, a couple of weeks, I won't like them anymore. But zeroing in on, I don't know, plants. I don't think I like photographing plants, but here I am having a good time and even enjoying the results. I guess in truth, the images that I truly like are just like little shapes, colors, lines, hiding in plain sight, to invoke a cliche. I get the most joy from that. Why I can't seem to know that all the time or retain that information, why I have to relearn that over and over and over, I certainly can't fathom, let alone explain. But here we are again, and only now do I remember that I've made this discovery in the past. Approaching some fairly exotic-looking cactus here. Have no idea, similar to the flower, what's going to happen with the color, but that is by no means a bad thing. It's nice. Think if I lived in a more interesting city, I would get a lot of pleasure doing similar types of shots in the city, repeated patterns and so forth. I haven't really been able to locate too much of that sort of thing going on in the architecture, shadows in downtown Albuquerque. Maybe the failing is mine. I have no doubt the failing is mine. Ever felt like you're stuck behind a barrier, can't progress, can't break through, can't improve your photography, to drop the metaphor? I feel that way a lot. I don't really right now, though. I must admit, I must say something positive and non-self-deprecating. I mean, I don't know that I'm improving necessarily, but I'm not stuck. And that alone is a good feeling, especially when you have previously spent a great deal of time stuck. But when you're starting out, when you're a new photographer, it doesn't take that much work to improve. It takes work, of course, but a reasonable amount of work. But after that, it just gets more and more difficult, more and more unlikely. It begins to take an inordinately disproportionate amount of work to just get a little better. You find yourself working years to go up in ability like 1%. Not an objective measurement, of course. I've spent lots of time excising all the little extraneous stuff from my approach, the things that don't lead to strong images. And so therefore, going forward, I waste no more time doing those things. So honing, getting lean, getting precise. I've unintentionally ended up in a very anything goes phase with my photography right now, revisiting abandoned ideas. Is that really so silly or a waste of time? Just kind of challenging my own dogma. It's super refreshing, actually. But as a result, I'm producing a lot of bad work and hopefully some good work, but all that time spent getting lean, I also think gets you stuck. And in some sense, you're a better photographer, but at the expense of something valuable. So is it better to approach photography with surgical precision or embrace the chaos and see what comes of it. I'm starting to think that both have a lot of value. More than having value, I think they're both necessary for growth, actually. And yet those two things are ideas which are diametrically opposed, so maybe an ideal approach would look something like this. Separate periods of bulking versus toning. Embrace the chaos, rein it in, get lean, get precise. Then more chaos. Repeat the cycle. By chaos, I mean unabashed experimentation. Growth versus getting the best shot possible in a given scenario. Maybe they're not the same thing. Maybe they're not even compatible. Maybe they're at odds with each other by nature. And maybe you don't like shooting plants, but maybe you should just go do it anyway and do the best job you can. Who knows? You may end up having a good time, and you may come back with something you like. It was true in my case, but also true in my case, and to bring it back full circle, maybe I also need an infrared camera, that extra little nudge, while I'm out there challenging all of my assumptions in order to improve what's in it for me. Infrared light, that's what's in it for me. It's fun. It's neat. You get bored with it, you put it away for a while. You break it out again. It's neat, all over again. Gift that keeps on giving. But maybe I will sell mine, I don't know.